Alrighty, welcome in everyone to just another edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It's Thursday, December 18th, and we're a day out from the college football playoff getting fully underway, and we got some great games this weekend. Obviously, two of them people are a little bit more down on. We'll talk about those in a second. We'll kind of just go chronologically throughout this weekend. In the first segment, we'll go Alabama, Oklahoma, Miami, Texas A&M, and then we'll get to the two G5 teams and see if they can do something special, see if they can shock the college football world this upcoming weekend. Then we'll get into all the bowl games that have happened thus far throughout bowl season and a couple coming up this weekend. And then we got to talk about the FCS playoffs. Got to give some love to Montana, Montana State, Illinois State, and Villanova, two Cinderella stories coming into the semifinals of the FCS playoffs this weekend. And then we got to do a little bit of a weekend wrap-up. Brian Smith has been fired by Ohio after only 1 year. Got to talk about the details there. Still relatively hairy up there in Athens, but we will talk about that. We'll talk about Joel Klatt's quote about Cinderellas and how there are points when he was correct. There are points when I think he was way off base, and we'll talk about that. The ACC scheduling thing is uniquely ridiculous, and then we'll give some best bets to finish this thing out and head into what's hopefully going to be a great weekend of football. But let's go and jump into this thing, and let's talk about those first round games that are going on around Norman, in College Station, in Eugene, and in Oxford, Mississippi. And we'll kind of just roll through this weekend the way it is going to play out, which means we're starting over there in Norman, Oklahoma tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Alabama favored by 1.5 over Oklahoma on the road, over under at 40.5. As you can imagine, the way these two offenses have been playing, the way these two defenses have been playing the last month of the season, Oklahoma really the entire season, and Alabama really since that Florida State game on the defensive side of the ball have been incredible. It's going to start with a war. This playoff is going to start with an outright war, a true rock fight in Norman. And the big question is, how much of that game in Tuscaloosa can Oklahoma replicate? They were +3 on turnovers. They got outgained. Alabama had more first downs. Can they make that happen again? Now, it should be said, Oklahoma's made that happen quite a bit. They are very, very good at forcing turnovers pretty consistently. So it's not to say it's out of the question that they can go +3 in the turnover category once again and find their way into another tight win over Alabama. Can they pull that off? It is a huge question and something that when we talk about turnovers in general, they're usually a relatively randomized stat. Is this random, or is this just who Oklahoma is, and is this where Alabama is in their offensive kind of identity right now? The other part that I'm curious about from Alabama's side is how healthy are they? I know there's going to be certain people out. The LT Overton situation is very relatively mysterious. Hope the best for him and he can get back on the field very quickly because he is a game changer, but he is not likely to play on tomorrow. How healthy are they? Is Parker Brailsford 100%? Is he 90%? Is he close to 100%? Because that is a massive changing factor for this football team. Will Josh Cuevas be good to go? If you can tell me that guy's on the field, I feel a whole lot more confident about what this Alabama offense can do, because I don't think people appreciate just how important that guy is. If I was ranking the most important players on that Alabama offense, it goes Ty Simpson, Parker Brailsford, and then Josh Cuevas. I think he is that important to what that football team does on the offensive side of the ball. Will he be ready to go? Will he be fully healthy? Massive question mark at this very moment. And then what do you get from Ryan Williams? He's obviously seems to be fully healthy. How do you utilize him? Can he make those splash plays that he is capable of making? He has not lived up to the hype, really, since that Georgia game last year. He's been a little bit quiet, a little bit all over the place, a little bit up and down. Doesn't mean he can't change the game on a specific Saturday, and he can do that tomorrow. There's no doubt about that. He absolutely can do that. The question for Oklahoma, and the question for Alabama in some ways is, since that Texas loss, how ugly can Oklahoma make it? How closely can Alabama follow what Texas did during that game over there in Dallas? Because that was really the only way anyone found an opening against this Oklahoma defense, and they were pretty slim openings. They found a couple openings early, a couple openings late in the run game, but that was just about it. It was not pretty in a lot of different ways for the Texas offense. It probably won't be pretty for the Alabama offense a number of different places throughout this game, but you got to find openings. You got to find small openings and take full advantage of them. That's what Texas did. Can Alabama replicate that? Because no one else has, including Alabama. And that first matchup didn't quite do that enough. The question for Ty Simpson, how healthy is he? Because I do think there is a question mark around. There's been talk about him having a little bit of a back injury, some things that have kind of hampered him late on this season. Would not surprise me in any sense of the word, but he's got to be okay. He's also got to get plenty of help. I don't see them magically finding a run game, but he's got to get a little bit. You got to find a way to put together some type of run game against the fifth best run defense in the country. They were at -3 rush yards against Georgia a week ago. They got to find a way to find small openings. It doesn't have to be you rush for 150 yards. If you can find a couple of rushes of 10 plus yards, 15 plus yards, that might be enough to give you enough openings in this football game. So in the first game, we talked about it. Can Oklahoma do what they did this time around or last time around? There is a possibility that the answer is yes there. They have so many different difference makers on both sides of the ball. R. Mason Thomas is going to play in this football game, and he's an absolute nightmare in a number of ways. It is going to be so interesting to see what can happen in this football game, to see if Bama can do what Texas did, to see if anyone can do what Texas did, or Oklahoma's kind of tighten the hatches. And frankly, even if you do what Texas did, it's not a guarantee that you're going to win the football game. So going to be really, really interesting to watch. I think both these teams, whichever one finds a run game, even with the quarterback with John Mateer, is he ready to roll? Can he make those big-time plays that he did make in the first-time matchup with his legs? And then the big-time X factor, as far as I'm concerned, is the kicking game. Tate Sandell just won the Lou Groza Award. Connor Tultzy's been a little bit shaky all season. So could Oklahoma just kick their way to a win? I see a reality here where this game ends 12-9, and it's all field goals, and it's ugly field position type football. That leans Oklahoma's direction pretty aggressively. I'm pretty lost on this one. I won't lie to you. In these first two matchups of this weekend, I'm relatively lost on what I go with. I have to go with the gut feeling. Both these teams are flawed. Both these teams are one-dimensional offensively. Both these teams have elite minds on each side of the ball as far as I'm concerned. It's got to be a gut feeling, and my gut feeling is Yonze Pierre is going to make a massive difference in this football game off the edge for Alabama. I believe Ty Simpson makes a number of big-time plays down the stretch of this football game, and Alabama wins it 20-17. I don't think it's going to be pretty. I was thinking about it earlier today. In these playoffs, I think the top 4 or maybe 5 units in this playoffs are on defense. That means it comes down to quarterbacks making big-time plays. I think Ty Simpson's still capable of that. It's been a little bit all over the place as of recent. If he can get a little time to just feel a little bit more comfortable, I think he's still dangerous. I still think he's a very accurate, dangerous quarterback. I think he will make the plays necessary for Alabama to win this one and move on to the Rose Bowl to take on the number 1 team in the country in the Indiana Hoosiers. Number 10, Miami, at number 7, Texas A&M. Maybe the most unpredictable matchup of this weekend, both in how it could go, who could win, and just how many points can get scored. I think both defenses are more than capable. I think if you catch Carson Beck and Marcel Reed on the right days, they're really, really hard guys to stop, and they can create incredible explosives. We know what these wide receiver cores are capable of, especially Malachi Toney, Mario Craver, Kevin Concepcion on the A&M side. It's a special matchup, and it is a very unpredictable matchup in a lot of different ways. They are flawed, but they can find openings and be very, very dangerous in a hurry. The Miami secondary might be the most underrated position unit in the entire playoffs. They've done such a good job this season, and it sounds like Keontae Scott is going to be back in this football game. So the question is this, and I think a lot of people noticed this. When A&M played Texas, their only loss of the season, I don't want to say that, they beat Notre Dame earlier in the season. The only elite team they played late in the season was Texas. They lose that game largely because the Texas defense was able to just rush 4 pretty much every single snap, drop 7 in coverage, and say, you're going to throw into tight windows today. You're going to have to find a way to beat us with your arm. Obviously, the injury early in the game to Marcel Reed did not help his case to be able to extend and make plays with his legs, but I still think the Texas defense had him pinned in pretty good. Miami can do that. Miami absolutely can rush 4 guys with Ruben Bain and Justin Scott and Akeem Mesidor on the front end, and then Keontae Scott makes big-time plays on the back end. O.J. Frederick makes a big-time play. Those guys are capable of that, the same way Texas was, maybe even more so than Texas was, especially on the back end, with guys like Keontae Scott and O.J. Frederick and all of these really, really talented individuals. They can force Marcel Reed into bad situations. A&M can force Carson Beck into bad situations. They love to play man coverage. That's the way A&M plays football. That's the way Mike Elko has played football for quite some time. He's going to line up and play you straight up. He's going to play man coverage a lot. The question is, can you keep up with these guys, especially number 10 Malachi Toney? He's the game changer. He's the guy that can totally turn this game on its head. He's the guy that can change this entire playoff. If he's really probably one of the 5 best football players in this playoff, he can totally change this thing. And if he gets single coverage consistently and he can handle that, he's going to do dangerous things in this football game. And he's going to do dangerous things against just about every football team that he plays. You got to find a way to slow down number 10 if you're A&M. It's not going to be an easy thing, especially if you can't get after Carson Beck, which Cassius Howell in this pass rush wasn't able to do all that often against Arch Manning. Now, Arch Manning did make some great plays with his legs, escaped some dirty pockets, did the things that he is capable of doing that maybe Carson Beck isn't quite as capable of doing, but they didn't get home quick enough against Texas. There's no doubt about that. Cassius Howell was kept entirely quiet. Is he ready to make those big-time plays, to change this game, to maybe force a fumble from Carson Beck? Because he's definitely more of a statue than you just played over there in Austin. And then Le'Veon Moss. Is he healthy? How healthy is he? Because this run game was, I don't want to say nowhere to be found, but missed a lot in the Texas game. Missed a lot of yards that they could have had that would have totally changed that football game. You're going to need number 8 on the football field. And it sounds like he will be. How close to 100% is he in? How can the Miami defensive line kind of handle this offensive line for A&M that's talking a little trash leading up to this football game? But this is going to be another one that I'm a little bit lost on. I think it's special because you can go any which way. At the end of the day, I'm going to lean towards the coach that I trust more, and that's Mike Elko. I cannot trust Mario Cristobal in this big-time spot. I think Miami does have advantages on the lines of scrimmage. I really do. I think this offensive line is difference makers. I think this defensive line is dangerous as can be with Ruben Bain and Nakeem Mesidor. I don't think they have the ability to make the plays down the stretch. I think Carson Beck will make a couple of massive errors on the road, and Texas A&M will find a way to move on and play Ohio State, the second best team in the country, which will be a very, very interesting matchup. Number 11, Tulane, on the road at number 6, Ole Miss. Ole Miss favored by 17.5, over-under at 56.5. We got to approach this one from what does Tulane need to do to pull the upset type of perspective. I don't think we can talk about this one like it's an even matchup in a lot of ways, but let's just go from that perspective. You got to hope. The Ole Miss offense is missing a step without Kiffin, and frankly, you could get that on the Ole Miss defense as well. Pete Golding has had a lot on his plate over the last couple of weeks. He's taken over as head coach. He's had to put together a recruiting class. He's had to keep that together. He's had to make sure they're ready for the portal. He's had to coach a defense on top of all of that. So there could be an opening on both sides of the ball where they're not totally lost, they're not totally terrible, but they're just a little bit off kilter, especially early in that game. Maybe Tulane can take advantage, jump out to a 10-point lead, and then we're really having a conversation. And Trinidad Chambliss is in a position he hasn't been a lot this season. You got to control the clock and run the football. You should be able to do that. A lot of people, pretty much everyone, has been able to run the football on this Ole Miss team. You got to be able to do that. If you can't do that, it's going to be a really long day at the office because I don't see the Ole Miss offense not being efficient in this football game. The Tulane defense has been a little all over the place this season, but the third thing that I think they have to do, elite red zone defense. It doesn't have to be outright perfect. If you can hold them to 2 or 3 times instead of 7, you're giving yourself a shot, and that's really all you can ask for in this football game on the road. If you can find a way to get a couple of openings against an offense that lost its play caller and a defense that has its play caller kind of occupied elsewhere for the time being, control the clock and run the football, which hypothetically you should be able to do against this Ole Miss Rebels defense, and then just get a couple of 3s on the board for Ole Miss instead of 7s, you can be in this football game, and you can be in it late, and then you never know what happens. You never know what player is going to make the mistake. You never know which player is going to step up. For all we know, Jake Retzlaff can handle this moment better than Trinidad Chambliss can. I wouldn't bet on that, but it doesn't mean that's not possible. I do think Tulane will be ready to roll. I think they're ready to fight for John Sumrall. He's left that place in the perfect way. In fact, every other coach should watch that as a way to go about your business if you're leaving one of your programs. But I think they're going to play better than they did the last time around. I can't trust their defense against this Ole Miss offense. I think Ole Miss just has too many guys. I think there is a number of ways that you could stop Ole Miss if you could match up on the outside one-on-one. I don't think they can do that. So I think it's going to be really hard to hold them down for 4 quarters. I'm going to take Ole Miss to win this one 37-17. I could see this one being a close game going into halftime, and then Ole Miss kind of takes over. Deep in this football game, Kejuan Lacey has a day, and Ole Miss is able to win this one relatively comfortably and move on to a rematch against the Georgia Bulldogs. Number 12, JMU against number 5, Oregon. Oregon favored by 21 in this game, 20.5. Kind of been bouncing back and forth there. 48.5 the over-under. This is the nightcap on Saturday. Again, got to approach it from a what does JMU have to do to upset them type of situation. And it's a really tightrope walk. Now, I think they have one thing in their advantage if they can pull it off, and that's a big-time question mark. They're number 2 in the country in time of possession. That's the way you upset big-time teams, is you control the football, you keep it out of the offense's hands, and you find a way to get 1 or 2 turnovers. And that's really that's been the way people go about business if they're going to get that big-time upset. JMU's been capable of doing that against the teams that they have played. Can they do that against a front like Oregon is a big-time question mark. Landon Ellis, their big-time player on the outside, got to make 1 or 2. Or maybe 2 or 3 one-on-one catches that flip the field, that change, that get momentum going, that give you that one big play that gives you a little bit of belief. Because if they put you away, if Oregon goes up early, they get one pick and they're up 14-0 before you know it, this game's over. And there's no shot for JMU to get back in it. If you can get one big play from Landon Ellis early in this football game, flip the field, get a little bit of juice behind you, then you never know what happens. And then you never know how Oregon's going to react in that position. And then you got to push Dante Moore off his spot. That is not remotely guaranteeing you're going to stop Dante Moore, but he has been absolutely lethal. If he can stand on his spot and just absolutely and go through his progressions and then rip the football to the open guy. You have to push him off the spot. You have to take him away from his primary and make him try to create on with his legs or try to create throwing the ball down the field while moving. It is a big-time question mark for him. It's a question mark for most quarterbacks. So it's not really a crazy idea, but you got to find a way to push him off his spot, make him a little bit uncomfortable, just not let him find his way to Kenyon Sadiq time and time again, because then you're in trouble. I do worry about JMU's reliance on the run. That can work. You can find a way to find small gaps. You can run for 3.5 yards per carry, slowly move the chains, and find a way to win this football game. But Wayne Knight has to be special, and the only way he can be special is you open a couple of run lanes for him, allow him to get one-on-one with some of these second-level players, and then he does something different. I think those are going to be few and far between. If I'm being totally honest, there is a JMU script here where they can do an incredible thing and upset Oregon on the road. I think Oregon's going to come into this one trying to prove something, and I think they're going to play this one very aggressive from the opening. I think they're going to jump out to an early lead and then kind of coast to the finish line. I'll take Oregon 34-14. I think that defensive line is just going to be too much for JMU. I think Oregon's offense is going to come out swinging and then kind of relax into their normal state of business in the second half. And I think Oregon gets a big-time win and moves on to play a Texas Tech team that seems to be the biggest question mark of this entire thing, not necessarily because we don't think they're great. How do they match up against these elite teams? I think we'll find out in a little bit when Oregon is able to face off against them. But it's a great group of games. Obviously, 2 are a little bit more intense, a little bit more unpredictable than the other 2. Doesn't mean we couldn't see a shocker. Doesn't mean we couldn't see some incredible things from 2 teams in JMU and Tulane that know exactly who they are and know how to go about business and can play these games relatively close. Obviously, we'll see how that develops, but I'm very excited for this weekend. It gets started tomorrow night with an incredible one in Norman that I expect to be a downright rock fight. But we'll talk about that more as the time goes on, and we'll break that one down, obviously, when it does finish up. But we got to talk about bowl games, and we got to talk about the FCS playoffs. Got to give that some love as well. We'll talk about it all right after this, so stick with us.